Welcome, everyone, from wherever you are on the planet. This is the second Sunday Dharma series, a fundraiser for the Insight Meditation community of Washington, D.C. I'm La Sarmiento, my pronouns are they, them, and I'm zooming in from the unceded and stolen land of the Piscataway, now known as Towson, Maryland, in the United States. I've been the guiding teacher for the IMCW BIPOC and LGBTQIA+ Sanghas for the last 16 years, and I'll be moderating this session. We're so happy to see those of you who are with us live, knowing that many more folks will be watching via the recording. We gather on the second Sunday of every month to spend time getting to know an inspiring Dharma teacher, their take on the state of the world through the lens of the Dharma, their own practice, and what's most important to them. We appreciate your donations for this event. Just a few announcements before we begin. Also joining us today are Sasha Forbes and Roberta Bregstone, who are providing ASL interpretation. Deep bows to you both. If you need closed captioning, please select CC Live Transcript on the bottom of the Zoom screen and show subtitle. If you're experiencing tech issues, please chat to the IMCW host. While we invite you to keep your camera on, as this can help foster a sense of community, we also honor your choice not to. Coming up on April 10th, my dear friend and IMCW teacher Ayesha Ali will be hosting Zenju Earthlyn Manuel, who will be giving a talk and taking your questions on her new book, The Shamanic Bones of Zen. Later on in our session, you'll have an opportunity to pose questions to Tuere during our time together. If you'd like to offer a question, please put it in the chat addressed to Questions Here. We'll get to as many as possible today. So without further ado, I'm deeply honored and delighted to introduce you to my dear friend and community Dharma leader sibling, Tuere Sala, pronouns she, her, and zooming in from the unceded and stolen land of the Duwamish, currently known as Seattle, Washington, in the United States. Tuere is a guiding teacher at the Seattle Insight Meditation Society and the founding teacher of the Capitol Hill Meditation Group. She is a retired prosecuting attorney who has practiced Vipassana meditation for over 30 years. Tuere believes that urban meditation is the foundation for today's practitioner's path to liberation. She is inspired by bringing the Dharma to non-traditional spaces and is a strong advocate for practitioners living with high stress, past trauma, and difficulties sitting still. Tuere has been teaching since 2010, is a recent graduate of the Insight Meditation Society's teacher training program, and has a long history of assisting others in establishing and maintaining a daily practice. In Tuere's presence, my heart always breaks open in the best way possible, so you're in for an amazing treat. So it's a true joy and pleasure, my friend, to have you join our Sangha today.
Thank you so much, La. I'm so happy to be with them. It's just been so long that it's been since we've been together, and so this is quite a joy, quite a treat for me. So I've been looking forward to it for a long, long time. So how about if we sit still just for a little bit, just so we can all bring our energies and hearts and minds to the same place? You know, it seems kind of strange that we're all in all these different spaces, but you've probably learned by now that being on Zoom, you still feel connected to each other. And so this interconnection, we can intentionally point by getting still together, getting quiet together. So bringing our minds together, you know, just noticing your body posture and feeling into where your body's at right now. Having a sense of knowing your body's posture. Might, just for a couple of minutes here, think about keeping our body still. So our feet are not moving and our legs are not moving. Our thighs, our sit bones, back body, arms, our hands, shoulders, the neck and the head, all just still. Just the body itself is just still in whatever posture it's in. And see if you can notice this is this kind of felt, it's a relative stillness. Maybe feel the heaviness of the body, whether it's lying down or standing or in a seated position. The body is a heavy amount of, it's a heavy form. The weight of it, you can feel it from the underside. So if you're lying down from the back body, you can feel the weight of the body. If you're seated in a chair, you can feel the weight of the body from the underside of your arms or the underside of your legs. And you can just take a moment to let gravity just gently pull the body down into the earth. This earth, it's solid, it's heavy, it's relatively still. Just a moment to notice this. And then you can notice the gentle movement of sensations within the body. Breathing, maybe tingling, blood flowing, nerve endings, maybe even agitation or thoughts going all over the place. And outside the bodies of sound, my voice stopping, starting. This is movement. And it's wind. It's aliveness, pressure. And we live within this dichotomy of stillness and movement every day, every minute of the day. And sometimes we're in the stillness of the body, the earth element, and sometimes we can be in the movement of wind. Sometimes, when we're lucky, we can balance the two and feel the stillness and notice the movement. Same time. So as you're sitting here with me, just notice whether you're caught in movement or stillness or both. So good to be here with you. Trying to see if I can. I've been thinking, like, how can I start this conversation? And I think the only thing many of you don't know me. And so I think the best way to start is to give you a little bit of understanding about who I am. Because a lot of my reflections today are based on where I came from, who I am in that way. I think who I am as a practitioner is what I'm pointing to. Because I could tell you about my life, just stuff that happened to me, but that's not really pointing to who I am. I think I want you to know who I am as a practitioner. And I started practicing in a closet because I was a Christian. I was raised Christian. I was raised in the Black church, and I loved it. And I sang in a choir. I mean, I was very active. I had 2 kids. I was a single parent, and I just finished law school. And just things were very difficult for me. They had been my whole life, though. I mean, I grew up in a very dysfunctional, very traumatizing house, and but my parents were very strong advocates for education. So, got to go to school, got to get a degree. And so I was always in school, whether I had kids or not. And of course, if I had 2 kids, I'm single parent, there's some drama in there somewhere. And so I have all this drama going on, but I'm going to school and I got my education. As soon as I get out of law school, I'm going to get the bar, take the bar. Everything's going to be great. That's why I used to tell the boys every semester, we're just going to get through this semester and then everything's going to be great. Don't worry. And I failed the bar the second time. When I failed the bar the first time, I just figured it was racist. Didn't have anything to do with me. And then when I failed it the second time, I thought, oh shit, it could be me. Could be something wrong with me. And all this thinking I've been doing all these years, it was as if my entire life of drama came flooding into me in one moment in time. And not everyone has such an extreme moment like I had coming into the Dhamma, but I was getting ready to go to church and I was trying to fix my hair and I was having a bad hair day. So I was trying to fix my hair, looking in the mirror without actually seeing my face. And I can think back on that moment and think, how in the world could I try to fix my hair without actually looking at myself? But that's what I was doing. In this dichotomy that we get into when you come from trauma, this way of trying to be in time without really being in time. And anyway, I lost it. I saw how weary I looked and how I was basically afraid. I didn't quite know what I was going to do. I was going to church by rote, but I didn't know in that moment what I was going to do or how I was going to feel my way out of this. I didn't know how I was going to face the boys and say, I've been preaching, law school. I'm going to be a lawyer. We're going to be famous. We're going to be rich. And I couldn't get past the bar. And I remember like sitting on the toilet, just losing it, not quite sure how I was going to face people at church. Everybody knew I was going to be a lawyer. And so I finally went to church, and after church, I went to something happened at church. I felt like I was missing something. Like somehow I had gotten the whole inspirational piece of hope and future is going to be better and optimism, but I had missed how to be in a life that was just going to be full of suffering. That even though I had kind of thought about life in the future, the truth is I was just going to live a life of suffering. So how was I going to be happy in that mess? And so afterwards, I went to the bookstore and I found a book. I was looking for a book on like, I wanted somebody to write a book about how bad life really was and not have this game like we're always Like it's going to be great. You too can be successful. All you have to do is this. The 7 things that effective, successful business people do. I didn't want a book like that. I wanted a book where somebody was saying, yeah, life sucks and you got to live with it. So here's how you can be happy in a sucky life. Because I had come to this resolve that that's the way it was going to be for me. And I just didn't want to keep pretending anymore. And so I found this book. It's a Tibetan Lojong practice of 59 slogans. They're little phrases. And then Trungpa Rinpoche gave the commentary. And the book was called Mind Training, Cultivating Loving Kindness. And I thought, that's it. I need to train this mind, get it in control, and then I'll be able to do whatever, I could be with whatever was going on. And I opened the book up, and the first slogan was abandon all hope of fruition. And I remember thinking, from a Christian background my whole life, what kind of cultivation of loving kindness would come from abandoning all hope? It didn't make any sense to me. And I read his little commentary and I thought, oh my God, this is the book. I gotta get this book. And I got that book. And every day my meditation practice was reading the slogan, which didn't make any sense. None of them did at the time. And practicing, reading his commentary on how to practice with it. And doing what I called meditation, which was sitting quietly for 45 minutes. So 15 minutes and sitting quietly for 45 minutes. And I wasn't quite sure that I was righteous in this. So I sat in the closet at night. So, in case I was doing a little devil worshiping, I just was drawn to it. In the years since then, I realized I was Buddhist when I was a little girl. I knew I was Buddhist, but I didn't know. All those things didn't come together until I failed the bar the second time, got some courage together, and passed the bar the next time, and went on to be a lawyer. But what happened in that moment in time kind of changed everything for me, because I was reading something I didn't understand. I didn't even believe in. I wasn't even sure I should be reading it. So you're kind of sneaking to read something, to learn something, but it's speaking to me. And I think this is part of what it is about Dharma with us, especially in the West here. There's something that has captivated us in something that's different than what we think of in traditional religion. And we're kind of captivated by it. But it took a long time for me to fundamentally understand what I was doing by practicing. Because in the beginning, it was just about, how am I going to be happy in the world? That's all it really was. And I didn't think of giving up God or giving up my religion or giving up there was my sacred path. And then there was this, like my little piece on the side over here. It was not really, it wasn't my faith. It's certainly not my religion. That's, I went to church every Sunday morning. That's what I did. And it took a while. That happened in 1990. And I did not actually admit to myself and let the Christian side of me go until closer to 2000. And it took a good 10 years of cultivating the paramis. It's what I've come to understand that I was doing, cultivating these paramis all the way up until I had a sense of steadiness about who I was. But all the way back during those years, I kind of took on this vow of how I wanted to be and how I wanted to live my life. And what really began to change it was two suttas. One sutta is the one I want to talk about really quickly, is the sutta that the Buddha gave to his, his mom, his aunt. Um, he gave it to her when she wanted to go out and be practice. She wanted to go off into seclusion and practice, and she wanted to know, how would I know what was of Dharma and what was not of Dharma? So how would I know if I'm all by myself and I'm not sitting here with you telling me that's Dharma, you can do that, that's not Dharma, And so he gave her 8 kind of qualities she could look for in whatever she was doing, and that would tell her whether or not she was following the Dhamma or whether she wasn't. And I learned that sutta in, I'd say it was the late 90s, early 2000s. And when I learned that, this is what I framed my life around. And I kind of did my own little vow to the Buddha, kind of like, I didn't have any idea how you became a Buddhist. I didn't know anything about, they didn't have insight. I mean, they had insight meditation, but it wasn't as widely known as it is now. They didn't have sanghas all over the place. And I was in a Black community and they didn't have no insight meditation in the hood. So I was just living in the hood, going to church, and I didn't know anything about it. So here I was making all this stuff up as I was going. And it's funny because I have friends that I know, we were going on the same path together. And yet we were on two different sides of the city. Same thing, two different sides. And anyway, I made up these vows. And this vow to be as kind as I could be, to do the least amount of harm, and to have this renunciate life that came from this sutta is what I begin to think about. So this is what I want to talk about. So if you were a practitioner, and the reason why this is important for us is because we don't have a monastery. So even though this is what I did, many of you could probably tell the same kind of story of how you came into the path, of just this decision you made by yourself without any help from anybody. You just made this decision to come into an environment or come into a world in which you didn't have any idea what it is that you were getting yourself into. And even the very nature of trying to sit quietly. I mean, we have the gift of apps now, and you can find a meditation instruction pretty easily now. But when I stepped onto the path, and I see some older people here, when we first stepped on, there was no meditation instruction like that. This idea of sitting with your breath did not make any sense at all. I mean, not even close. And especially if you didn't have anyone else around you, it was just all very much a take it on faith, I guess, kind of thing. So when I came up on this sutta, this is what gave me the guidance for knowing when I was in Dhamma and when I wasn't. So what the Buddha told his mom was that you would live a life of restraint. And to me, it was, what could I do that would be of restraint? I mean, I had kids, so it wasn't like I was going to give up candy, because, yeah, we were going to have some candy in the house, because that was always going to help settle things down when things got a little ugly. I wasn't going to give up playing with them and TV, and it just didn't seem like I was going to be a monastic. But I had to live with a life that was restrained. And so what I chose to give up was getting my way all the time. And I began to realize that my need to get my way was so, well, I'm a Virgo, so many of you know I'm always right anyway. So I can't help that I was born right all the time. So the idea would be to give up having my way so I could stop all the arguing with people that didn't really get it. And in exchange for that, I would be giving people this generous gift of letting them be right. And somehow the framing of that generosity of giving someone the opportunity to be right had this significant impact on me over the years. I didn't realize at the time. I was just trying to find something I could, live a life of restraint. And that's the way I thought I could live it. It's freeing oneself from habitual patterns. So I wanted to do a practice that was actually going to help me look at the patterns in my life that were habitual and problematic and actually free myself from it. So whatever I was doing, if it was leading me more into my habits, it was not of Dhamma. If it was helping me see these habitual patterns and move away from it, then I would know. I was what the Buddha said was whether or not you're fettered. If the behavior leads you into a more fettered life, it's not of Dhamma. If it leads towards unfettered, then it's of Dhamma. He said if your practice was driven by a life of dispassion, that's the first one, freeing one's life of restraint, then that would be of Dhamma. But if it was leading to more passion, then that would not be of Dhamma. So that's the one I'm going to have to talk about for a minute, because I know there's probably going to be some people in there like, what? No passion? That was the problem I had. But anyway, if you're shedding things and living a more simple life versus accumulating things and living a more complicated life, so dismantling a lot of the attachments to stuff and things, having few wants, which was you live a more modest life, and not so much self-grandizing, and contentment with life. So the more contented I was rather than being discontented, and I was a pretty grumbly person. So I'm very averse, and I was pretty much angry and afraid of everything. So now people know me. They meet me for the first time now. They think, oh my God, Tuere, you're so calm. You're so happy. You're so easygoing. My boys would beg to differ. I was uptight, perfectionist. Don't bring me one of those pictures that has an orange sky, because I was going to point out that the sky was blue and that you should work on making a blue sky. So I was very, very picky about how things had to be. Everything had to be just like I wanted it. And if it wasn't, I would freak out, because I was pretty much living in trauma mode most of my life. And so when you're living in trauma, you are going to do a lot of damage to a lot of people unless you come to terms with that. So this contentment with life was something I had to work on hard. Arousing persistence rather than being lazy. Seclusion, not entanglement. So I needed to be less entangled with stuff and more willing to just be alone with whatever. And I just think of that aloneness as being alone with my own thoughts. Can I be alone with my own sense of direction to go? So a lot of the decisions I made at that time, I took on a vow of celibacy, and I was going to give up going out to the clubs and things like that. And a lot of that stuff that I let go of, I was 30, I was in my 30s, early 30s. And so many of my friends thought I was stupid. They thought I was like, being brainwashed by some kind of a cult, even though I didn't have any people. It was just me. So it couldn't be brainwashing. So there was this sense of having to go this aloneness without feeling shame or dejection or something was wrong with me because I was choosing something. That's what I think of as seclusion for urban practitioners. Arousing persistence, not being lazy. So actually, engaging myself in this practice and not just kind of calling myself a Buddhist and not really doing anything. So actually engaging in practice and doing something, and not being burdensome, so easy to support. This is what now his mom was a nun, so she was living as a monastic, and I had kids, and I was living in this urban world that did not have the protections of robes, and it did not have the protections of a monastery. And I'm living out in a world where um, I'm really going against the grain. And so I think for this last couple minutes here, few minutes that I want to talk about this practice being about going against the grain. It is, I'm just going to have to put it to you straight. It is not a practice to help you feel good. It is not a practice to help you be, to heal so much from trauma. This is not a psychological kind of therapeutic thing, even though having spent many years from trauma in therapy, I have no doubt that it is the Dharma that helped me free myself from the trauma. I did need the therapy, so I'm not trying to get things twisted here. I needed the therapy in order to understand what was going on, to even understand that I was operating out of trauma. Because, I didn't think I was operating out of trauma. I thought I was just protecting myself and doing what needed to be done. But really, I was just like Pigpen, carrying around a lot of mess all around me because I was operating out of trauma. And so when I finally begin to see the trauma and understand it and work with it, that was, that's what healed me. But what saved me, what put me in a position for being liberated was Dhamma. I mean, it's one thing to, not get up every morning carrying the weight of your childhood on your back every day, carrying the weight of some abuse that happened. That's one thing. But it is a whole nother world to get up every morning in pure joy. That's a different framing. And therapy does not give you joy. That a spiritual practice has to do. Therapy can help you understand and shed the weightedness of trauma, the claustrophobicness of it, give you some space to breathe and come alive. But what's really going to help you get up, laughing, joking, smiling, and really glad to be alive, joyous in the face of all kinds of difficulties? That's spiritual. That's Dhamma for me. And the Christian church didn't do that. It did give me an uplift. There's no doubt gospel music, if you're not dead, it's going to give you an uplift, a sense of, I can do it. I can do it. It's going to do that for anybody. But it was fleeting, because unless I was singing, I would lose it, and I would still go about life in this drudgery. But now I am full of joy regardless. And it comes from this kind of dedication to the practice. It's what Buddha was giving his mom, the instructions he was giving her. He was giving her these instructions so that she could be a monastic and yet go off on her own and find her way in her own path. And she didn't have to be tied to like his hip in order for her to trust that she knew the Dhamma and she could figure it out and she could find her way. And this is very important for us in this culture we live in this insight practice, because we don't have that tied to place. In some respects, we're a little overloaded with the Dhamma. there's so much Dhamma all over the place. And it's so, I mean, now with Zoom, all these teachers that we never could see, we can now see, and there can be this greed, grasping energy of, I want to do that, I want to do that, I want to do that, I want to do that. And we can mistakenly think that we are doing all this great practice because we are grasping after all of this Dhamma. But some of that is just not wanting to miss out. And it's just out of greed, and it's not out of Dhamma. So the way that you can tell is this list that the Buddha gave. This is how you tell if the practice you're doing is actually bringing you into the world of Dhamma, or whether it's bringing you, or if it's just greed, want, expecting everything to be a certain way. But the one that gives people the most trouble, I think, is the one I want to talk about, is this idea of living a life in restraint. Now, the Buddha says, if it leads to dispassion, that is Dhamma. If it leads to passion, that is not of Dhamma. And we get caught up in this word passion because oftentimes we think of passion as the thing that, I'm alive for. So I'm advocating for social justice. I was a prosecutor and, I wanted to win. So I didn't think about, oh, I'm okay whether I win or I lose. I didn't think of it like that. I wanted to win, and I wanted to put people I thought were, the behavior I thought was wrong. I wanted that behavior punished, and I wanted people punished, and I wanted victims to get justification and restitution, and I mean all of that. So, in when I first started practicing with this first quality here, I always struggled with this idea of the word passion, and so we have to be careful reading Pali words that are translated into English, and we use our ordinary understanding in order to determine what the Buddha was saying in sacredness. It's very different understanding. And passion that he's talking about is really greed and hatred. This kind of way that we go through life, and the things that we hate, there's an ill willness to it, aversion, a shoving, a pushing, a violence that's actually happening against that thing that we hate. So my ill will, if I think I'm right all the time, there's nothing really wrong with that. But if at my need to think I'm right, I got to think you're wrong, and I got to push against your wrongness to the point where you cannot talk because I'm right. And anything you say, anything you do, you have to stop it. And the hatred of that is why Russia goes into Ukraine. It's no different in me than it is in Russia. It's just that I don't have any power to go and invade any country. But if I did have that power, and I was the person I was 30 years ago, there's no doubt that I would go into some country and do whatever killing I got to do to get what I think I'm supposed to have. I mean, I heard a lot of people, a lot of my partners, my kids, it didn't matter because I never thought of myself as doing something wrong. I thought of myself as doing something necessary. And we all think that way when we are in hatred. We think you are wrong, I am right. And that's it. So that the level of passion that the Buddha was pointing to is this hatred and ill will and this pushing and this violence against anything we don't like, anything outside of our preferences, anything outside of our own opinions, we push against. And that pushing is the problem. Or the converse of that, the greed, the have to have what I want. And I don't really care I mean, we don't think about it like that. We don't let ourselves admit that we would step on anybody to get what we want. But when greed is operating in our lives, we will do whatever harm to whomever to get what we want, to get what we think we're entitled to get our way, to make this come into being. And whoever gets hurt in the interim, so be it. And what the Buddha was pointing to is to find yourself into a place where you're going to live in dispassion, meaning that I'm not living out of the push and pull of greed and hatred. I'm living out of the compassion impulse of doing no harm. So doing no harm means that if I feel harm, out of compassion, I'm going to do whatever I can to alleviate that harm, not out of my own preferences of doing what I want or not doing what I want, not getting, making sure I don't get what I don't want and making sure I get what I want, making sure all mine get what they want and don't take anything they don't have to take. So when I think about all the social movements in the world, there's a level of dispassion that can come from those social movements, even though I'm going to be out there protesting wars just like everybody else and doing my part. But I'm not protesting out of hatred for you. I'm protesting out of the sense of doing no harm and acknowledging that and doing whatever it takes to further that sense of, can we at least stop harming each other? What is that going to take for us to stop harming each other? And what I learned over the years of practicing in this way is that if I did not just read this list, this is the last thing, and then Law and I are going to talk of some questions. But if I took this list of 8 things, and I'll leave them for Law so that you can get them. But if I took this list of 8 things, and instead of assuming what this meant, and I actually felt it out through my life, is this leading to more passion? Is this leading to dispassion? Is this leading to suffering? Is this leading to less suffering? I felt my way through. I begin to understand this list in a completely different way. It's not the 10 Commandments. It's 8 ways of feeling harm, is a way you can think of it. Feeling and getting sensitive to knowing harm has arisen in this moment and what to do when you feel that harm. And it takes quiet, it takes closing your eyes, it takes feeling your way through, just like you can feel your way through to knowing where stillness is and knowing where movement is, and just looking for it. What is leading to liberation and what is leading away from liberation? And this is what I used for my guideline. And I hope that we all as practitioners begin to use guidelines like this so we can really bring this Dharma in. I just think, okay, last piece. I believe this. When Thich Nhat Hanh said the next Buddha was going to be a Sangha, I think he was looking at what was possible in the West. Because if we would practice at the level that monastics practice, even as lay people, there is a way that we would carry this Buddha teachings for 2,600 more years. But if we keep practicing as Dhamma being something that's going to make me happy, I fear that we may be the cause of the Dhamma dropping off into some kind of, some kind of, I don't know, philosophy in life, and all the efforts that these monastics have carried for years will go by the wayside in our world. So I do think we need to take this seriously, what we're stepping into, and hopefully we will do the former and carry this 2,600 more years into the future. Could you imagine what the world would be like if, 2,600 years, when now you have apps and everything? Oh my God, it's just overwhelming what's possible with us as practitioners. So thank you so much for listening. We'll just take a moment and let Law bring in some questions if you have some.
Thank you so much, Tuere. Powerful, beautiful talk. Yeah. So Aisha asks, can Tuere share the name of the sutta, the Buddha talking to his mom?
It's Gotima, Sutta to go to me. And here's the site number is AN, what is this, 8.53. It's the sutta to instructions to Gautami.
Great. Thank you, Tuere. So again, just a reminder, if you have questions for Tuere, please put them in the chat addressed to questions here. And so I'll just start us off with a few warm-ups that I have. So how would you define what awakening is for you, Tuere? We all, are moving in this direction of awakening, but where are we moving to? What does awakening mean for you?
I think it's, I guess that's a great question, La. I think it's really being sensitive to harm and not, so usually when we think of harm, it's something we don't want. It's the hatred side. So if I feel harm, I got to get rid of it. And my first impulse is to get rid of that. Something's wrong because I feel harm. And I think awakening is when we come into an understanding, finally, that harm is all around us. It will not be ending anytime soon if we live in samsara. And it's this willingness to feel harm, move in harm, and not have to push it away. Instead, we just are willing to feel it, care for it, love it, be with it, have a relationship with it. And the more intimately we get with it, the more awakened we become. I think that's the way I would think of someone who, somebody who's awakened. They could be with a lot of harm and not have this sense of gotta fix it, get rid of it somehow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, Tuere. So how does that work then? Like if someone causes us harm, or say like an institution causes harm, something systemic causes harm. So how do we hold that accountable?
So if we're operating out of greed and hatred, then there's all this ill will and we're pushing against the institution itself. When you're operating out of harm, you are acknowledging the harm that's there. So this is the best way this is the best example I can give of this. Because it's hard to put words to it because we think of it in ordinary sense, but this is the best example I can give. And I'm going to out myself in a thing that I did wrong. So I had two friends. One was white and one was, she's a person of color, mixed race, brown skin. And we were about to walk into the meditation hall, and I noted that the white woman's skin was really beautiful. It was sunny and the olive color of it, whatever. And I said, "Oh my God, your skin is so beautiful. That color is just so beautiful." And it was a very awkward moment. I don't really know why it was awkward, but the person of color, the white woman looks at the person of color, and the person of color looks at the white woman. They look at me, and Nobody says anything. 2 seconds, we go into the hall, done deal. I'm thinking there's no problem. I felt the awkwardness, but I didn't really think nothing of it. And then we were doing a retreat. I couldn't see the BIPOC friend. And then at the end of the retreat, they asked me if I wanted to go walk and talk. And I'm like, sure, it's like, we didn't get a chance to talk the whole retreat. I thought we were going to have this great talk and how you doing? How's the family? What's going on for you? And actually they wanted to pretty much call me in for saying this color thing, giving this compliment to this white woman, how awkward it felt. And I remember feeling like you're wrong, that you're pushing against this. I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't say anything wrong. What are you talking about? I can give somebody a compliment. What the hell is happening? And they were trying to help me see that I had caused them harm because no one ever says their color is beautiful. And it just the whole thing didn't make any sense. And so my energy was around, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. But I have learned to feel sensitive to harm. And I don't know where the harm comes from. And I began to feel there was suffering here. And I didn't know who's suffering. Mine for being for like expecting this to be this great walk, and I'm getting chewed out now. And is it hers? I don't know whose harm it was. But because I'm sensitive to harm, I do not push against that anymore. So I just stopped talking. I said, okay. I feel some suffering here. So let's sit down. Let's just talk about this and see what's going on. And that's when I started listening to, it wasn't really about me and what I said and whether I should have said this as a compliment or not. It was the fact that I said it with her standing right there. And I don't have brown skin. So some things that brown skin people go through, I don't go through. And I had to listen to what it felt like to have someone who has brown skin, who's always had that color, being treated like it was a bad thing, scary thing, not good. And here I was kind of accentuating that. And so that understanding didn't come from not doing anything about it. It came from having the capacity to let go of my own pushing and just listen to the harm of it itself. Then when you hear the harm, it was without a doubt that I realized what was the problem with what I had said and what I had done. And so I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna have to keep this close to me as a reminder of what it is that we're trying to do here. It's not whether she's right or I'm right. It was more about being willing to hear the harm and move and operate from a point of there's harm here and that's what needs to be alleviated. Do you see what I'm saying? So it's even in institutions that cause harm, if we're just pushing on the institutions, it doesn't really work that way. But if we begin to point out where the harm is, like I think that's part of I can't have long answers, but I'll never get any questions. But last thing, it's part of the problem with defund the police. Anyone that knows anything about the way the police operate, and I was in the prosecutor's office for years, it's crazy that they bring tactical maneuvers into a mental health situation. It's mind-boggling, especially when mental health people don't bring tactical maneuvers into a mental health situation and still can manage to, not every mental health provider is dead. So somehow there's a way that we can do this without having tactical maneuvers like you would in a criminal situation. But the languaging of defund the police, which made total sense to me, got a ton of pushback because what happened was people began to think, oh, we don't want the police anymore. And it really wasn't about that. It was changing some of the funding mechanisms that we don't need the police for every single 911 call. And yet it lost its impact because it felt like a push against the police department. And so I'm not saying that I could have came up with a better way at the height of when all this was happening. Anything anybody would have said would have came across that. But just because the word defund the police lost its emphasis doesn't mean the harm of police dealing with tactical maneuvers in mental health situations is not a necessary thing to continue to articulate in whatever language we can. That's what I mean. So it doesn't mean that you stop. It's defund the police and only defund the police, but it's recognizing defund the police may have been a starter, but what we're getting to in a more sensitive level is we do not need the police to come help get the cat out of the tree. We can use some other tactics and use a completely different first responder team that isn't even called the police. And we may have to figure out what that is. But that's what I'm pointing to.
Thank you, Tuere. The questions that we're having in the chat is, 1 second here. What does an urban contemplative practice look like?
Yeah, I think it's because we don't have monasteries, and we don't have robes, and we don't have a way to have our faith or our practice accentuated in that way, then it becomes how you live your life. I mean, even for monastics, it's how they live their lives, but they have some protections around them, and we don't have that. So to me, it has to do with this list of 8 qualities that you are moving through the world in, and you are not just trying to use the practice to make yourself feel better or to make we talk about being happy all the time, but that really is a byproduct of actually it's undoing the defilement. And so as an urban practitioner, it means we have to give up some things in the world. It means being in the world, but not of the world. So it means actually maneuvering through the world and putting practice in front of everything else we do. So an easy simplification of this list would be put the word meditation behind anything you do. So just like when you go on retreat and you got your yogi job, this is the cleaning the toilet meditation. Just like you have sitting meditation, walking meditation, eating meditation, and you got your yogi job meditation. So I put the word meditation after everything. Going to the grocery store, meditation. And something about beginning to see everything as meditation was, in effect, a way for me to get sensitive and pay attention to whether I was causing harm, whether I was, being as kind as I could be, and whether I was, letting go of this need to get my way all the time, whether I was actually practicing within that framing. So you don't have to use this 8 list. You could also use the Eightfold Path. It's just the having a list of qualities you're going to live out of. It could be the paramis, the 10 perfections. It could be the 4 Brahmaviharas, 4 aspects of metta. It could be any list. But everything you do, you have to be sensitive to whether you are within this framing or you're outside of this framing. Am I within the Brahmaviharas or am I outside of the Brahmaviharas? And it's not so much about trying to make yourself always in. It's knowing when I'm in and when I'm out, when I'm following the standard and when I'm not, so that you can learn how to see your way through in the darkness. That's what I think it is.
Yeah, thank you, Tuere. This is from Zadie. How do you keep to these practices when the people you live with, interact with every day, are not on the same Buddhist path? I find I struggle being understood with folks who are on no spiritual path.
So I come from conservative black folk with church. That's all they knew. So my mother would take me to lunch and she would say, let's go to lunch. Let's go to breakfast. And then I think we're going there to have a good breakfast, laugh and talk. But eventually she would say, Dee, when you're coming back to God, Jesus loves you. She thought I had somehow left God and she was her duty as a mama to get me back into church. I had sisters say I was going to hell. I mean, I think they believed it. I don't think they were trying to be mean. I think they thought they were trying to help me, get me back straight on the straight and narrow. And what I learned was that actually my practice is for me to be sensitive to harm. So the place where I shared my Dharma was in Sangha. I did not share it with my family because they could not understand why I didn't want my sister to kill gnats. Why I wanted to find a way for her to do something with the fruit to stop producing all these gnats and then killing them all. So it's sort of like that did not make sense. But understanding it was like I used my practice to help me understand them, not help them understand me. My practice, that was for me and my Sangha to deal with. Because I knew if I went to Sangha, I could share experiences and they would understand exactly what I'm talking about. But for them, for my family and the world I was with, it was me trying to understand, does this lead to more suffering? Does this lead to less suffering? And in me, is arguing with my sister about whether I'm going to hell going to lead to more suffering? It's going to lead to less suffering. And I gradually learned how to stop arguing with them about what I thought was right or wrong. But it didn't come from some edict that said, don't do this. It came from feeling into, is this causing me suffering? Because I'm going over to the house on Sunday for dinner. Okay, so that's there's no way I could say, I'm not going over to your house anymore on Sunday dinner. So I'm going over there to Mama's house, and she's going to be there, and we're going to get into the same arguments over and over and over. And I'm going to yell and cuss and scream and holler because that's my way. Everybody's going to be all peaceful and kind because that's their way. They're a little passive. And I'm going to go home and I'm going to stress out about it. And the Buddha's instruction to Rahula was, before you do an event, think about it. Is it skillful? Is it harmful? During the event, is it skillful? Is it harmful? And after the event, is it skillful? Is it harmful? So I learned to come home after I had blown up, yelled at everybody, cussed, maybe you shouldn't be a practitioner. Maybe you're not very good at meditation. All that. I would go home and I would sit and I would relive that event. Who did what? Who said what? What happened? Why did I say that? What went there? And I would sit and feel into the whole event because the mind doesn't know whether you're in reality or you're imagining. So you just relive it. Think through it. Notice, where did you go astray? Why was this harmful? Why was this? And then you go about your life. Next time, you try not to argue. And of course, the next time I argued. And then I would come home and I would do it again. But what begins to happen? This is the nature of practice. If we just had some rule that said, don't do it, and we didn't do it, that's not really practice. The nature of this is to discern, is this suffering? Is this not suffering? And when you begin to discern, is this suffering? Is this not suffering? You don't have any problems not choosing suffering anymore because we don't always know what we're doing that leads to the suffering. Mm-hmm. And we end up just upset and we don't know how we got there. And so we just think, oh, I'm not going over to their house anymore because they're the reason why. But really, It was more, I thought I was better than, because I'd found the little path and I was good at it. And I was beginning to see a little bit of peace. And I thought, oh, and then I just wanted them to be like me. And it's just not like that. People have to find their own path.
Mm.
And so I learned how to be around people who did not follow the path. And I could clearly feel their suffering. And I could clearly feel how difficult things were for them and how they were going down the same patterns over and over and over. But I did not hate them for it. And I didn't get caught in the entanglement of having to fix their lives. I could be around them, share in their stories, and be good with it. But it took practice. That's pretty much how I did it.
Yeah. Thank you, Tuere.
Mm-hmm.
Rachel writes, if I heard you right, I think you said this path isn't about feeling good, but you've also said that the spiritual practice is what enabled you to wake up and live in joy every day. This sounds a lot like feeling good. The idea of freedom from suffering also sounds like feeling good. Can you say more about what you mean that this path isn't about feeling good? Thank you.
I know. This is why we cannot use English words to talk about this, because it's sort of like concentration. If you strive to get concentrated, it's so painful. And it's very difficult to even get concentrated. But if you just sat there and watched a movie, I mean, I love The Matrix, but it was 3 hours long. Lord of the Rings, I loved it. 3 hours. I could sit right there. I don't care. They could have a fire going on in the apartment down the street, and I'm glued to the TV right there. I'm not going nowhere. That's concentration. But when we're interested and we're just there, there's no striving. There's no trying to get somewhere. Concentration comes. It's the same way with this path. If you're trying to be happy and make everything good and perfect, then you end up struggling all the time. You keep missing the mark. But if you are on the path for the path itself, for the seeing of what leads to liberation and what leads away from liberation, for the seeing and learning to be sensitive to harm, the byproduct of that right effort is joy. I mean joy, period joy. Not joy because something good happened to me. I mean the byproduct of learning to be sensitive to harm and suffering is joy. And that is a weird phenomena. But I think the reason why joy is the byproduct is because anyone that's ever done anything, like I don't even think the civil rights movement could have happened if it were not for joy. Because joy is what enables you to get up and deal with some difficulty for the long haul. Anger can get you motivated, but it's short and it's just short and quick, you know? It's like it can get you moving, but it can't sustain you all the way. It'll burn you up before you get to the finish line. But joy can have you going every single day, day after day, after day, after day, after day, after day, after day. When I think about Ferguson and all the days they would get up and go protest every day, they didn't have no jobs. They didn't have nothing else to do. And the level of joy that some of the people would talk about, the singing and the being together. There was so much camaraderie that joy is what kept you right there, right there, right there, right there. And so the joy was not the thing that they were looking for. What they were looking for were changes in the criminal justice system and the social constructs of Ferguson. But the joy is what happened after they came together in a very difficult time with persistence. That's what the joy is I'm talking about for awakening. It's a byproduct. It's not the product. And if it becomes the product, then you get more interested in getting some kind of joy. And that is kind of ordinary joy. It's not the real joy. That is the byproduct of practice.
Thank you so much, Tuere. We're out of time now. So
I
thank you, dear
see.
Sangha, for all these great questions. And so, Tuere, would you kindly lead us into a closing meditation?
Sure. Okay, so we're just going to close our eyes for a moment, not because you have to close your eyes, but just because closing your eyes adds a level of seclusion. Now you're sensing into what's happening for you, your experience, what you heard, your question that didn't get answered, what you really wanted to know, all the talking that's going on. Can you just see that? All the energy in the body. Can you see that as movement? It's wind. We live with it all the time. It's wind. Just let it be there. It's okay. And then can you notice that the body is not moving? Let it be still for a moment. So you can feel into what stillness feels like. Or I guess it's more like a relative stillness. Find our stillness. We can find it anytime just by closing our eyes, taking a moment, and not moving. We can feel the solid stillness of earth, the groundedness of just being in this moment. And we can let the movement of wind just go. Okay. Stillness and movement. This is the dichotomy we live with all the time.
Thank you so
Thank you
much,
so much,
Tuere.
guys, man. Thank you
So
so
great
much,
to be
love.
together again and with the
It was
Sangha and
great.
sharing your deep wisdom
I
and just,
know.
you're just a dharmic treasure, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I hope the other questions can become like a thing that generates conversation. You don't have to really hear it from me. The questions themselves lend an answer, so you can hear it from each other and still get a deep answer.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tuere. And thank you, dear Sangha, for making the time to join us. And we appreciate your presence and your generous donations in support of IMCW's second Sunday Dharma series. The recording of this event will be emailed to all who registered within the week. So may you and your practice continue to thrive for the benefit of all beings. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tuere.
Thank you. Bye-bye.